Hi, everyone. My name is Brianna Matzke. I'm a pianist based in Cincinnati, and I serve as assistant professor of music at Wilmington College in Ohio. Thank you to Joanne for inviting me to be a part of this year's Pedagogy Saturday Young Professionals track. I think I'm still technically considered a young professional myself. I finished my doctorate in 2014, and when I was reflecting on what my career has been like since then and what I wanted to share with you all today, I realized how much those early professional years felt a bit bewildering. Starting my career was exhilarating too, but more than anything, I wanted to just find my way and to feel a bit more sure of myself. I think for many of us, entering the professional realm of music teachers can feel like walking into the wilderness with no map to follow in order to reach your goals. So, in this session, I want to try to create a little bit of that map. Over the past month, I had 5 conversations with 5 of today's most prominent pedagogues. They were talking about their own musical background, their training, and their early career experiences. They offered up stories of their own good and bad decisions and ended up sharing some really incredible advice. Through our talks, they clearly demonstrated the principles and mindsets that lead to lifelong success. What follows is a series of clips from our interviews that I hope will illustrate what we all can do to find satisfaction and fulfillment in our own careers. Here are the 5 guests to introduce themselves now.
I am Michelle Conda. I'm head of secondary piano and piano pedagogy. I also am the division head of the keyboard area at the University of Cincinnati College Conservatory of Music.
My name is William Chapman Nyaho, and I have a private studio here in Seattle. I'm also on the adjunct faculty of Pacific Lutheran University, and then I teach summers at Interlochen Summer Arts Camp.
My name is Diane Hidy, and I live in San Francisco, a few short blocks from the ocean, and I teach a very wide variety of students. I teach just privately. I don't have a school affiliation, and I can do exactly what I want.
My name is Angela Cheng. I am professor of piano at Oberlin Conservatory. I teach just solo piano performance majors. And then on top of that, I play some concerts in North America, well, actually all over. Been lucky enough to have these opportunities to perform.
My name is Courtney Crappell. I wear a few hats here at the University of Houston. So I work within the Morris School of Music at the University of Houston. So I hold the position of professor of piano and piano pedagogy. I'm also the director of the School of Music. And simultaneously, I have an associate dean position, associate dean of operations for the college.
All of these professional music teachers spoke about music's central role in their childhood and how it not only gave them a way to have fun, but that music was part of the formation of their personal identity. Some, but not all, spoke about knowing early on that they wanted to be a professional performer or a professional piano teacher.
I have loved music since probably the day I was born, or probably before I was born. Who knows? I just know that I had to play the piano. When I was about 5 years old, 4 years old, I got my tonsils out. And for being a good girl, I got piano lessons, and I was so thrilled. I was fortunate that, like I said, I'm from rural Pennsylvania. It's not a lot of people. So when I got old enough to play for church, which in rural Pennsylvania was about 9, I started playing in church and really loved it. I had so much support from all the congregation that made a huge difference. They always came up afterwards and said, "What a good job you do." And if I would get off, they would just sing louder. Then when I got in high school, I'm playing for the high school choir and just living in the band room, in the choir room. It was a lifestyle. I always knew what I was going to do. When I was in 3rd grade, I found about a year ago, I found some papers from when I was in 3rd grade, and the question was, "What are you going to be when you grow up?" and I put I'm going to be a piano teacher.
So, I grew up in a family of 6 kids, and my parents were educators and also in the civil service. And there was a lot of music around. My eldest sister, I'm the youngest of 6, and my eldest sister was a pianist, and my other sisters before me were playing, and my brother too. So there's always music in the family, and I enjoyed it, and I just tried to copy them. The school I went to, Achimota School, really sort of celebrated music, the arts and culture, and our traditional cultures as well. And so I was not only part of, you know, traditional dance group, but also had a great piano teacher by name John Barham, who was just amazing. And so Ghana had the British system sort of O level and ordinary level and A level exams. And so for the O level and A level exams, the questions actually came in from London. And so we had set works. So when I was in high school, we had to know, all kinds of amazing pieces, Schubert's Fifth Symphony, and we had to write essays on that. Um, and so that was really quite a very, very intense musical education that I had. And so, um, and applying to Oxford, which was highly encouraged by my father, um, I ended up in it. I ended up there.
Well, I grew up here in San Francisco, and I was the youngest of 5 kids. And I don't really remember a time when I did not play the piano. There are pictures of me playing the piano when I don't even think I was 2, just sitting at the piano. And I always thought people would ask me if I came from a musical family, and I would always say no, because I somehow thought somebody who came from a musical family, I don't know, I guess I thought their parents had to be professional musicians or something. But my dad was a pastor, and he had earned his way through seminary playing in dance bands and singing. And he was really, first and foremost, a jazz music lover. So I grew up in a house that listened to both classical music and lots of jazz. I was certainly not like a conservatory kid. I didn't um, I didn't particularly want to be any famous pianist. I didn't have any things like that in my mind. I just liked making music. I just thought it was really fun. I liked to play the piano. I was really good at it. So that's what I did.
When I was very young, I was told that I would be playing the piano. It wasn't my choice. My mother's side of the family grew up loving music. My grandfather had spent a little time in North America and fell in love with the violin. So all 9 of his children and all the grandchildren played either the piano or the violin and Western music. So this is back in Hong Kong. I studied with different aunts. Well, first I started with my mother, then I started with another aunt and then another aunt. And then we moved to Canada when I was 11. And I remember asking my mom, I said, I think I need to have my piano lessons. She said, well, there are no more aunties here that teach piano. And so we would have to pay for lessons. Are you sure you want this? I said, I really think I need it because school was difficult at the time because my English was not very good coming from Hong Kong, being a very good student in Hong Kong and then barely passing in 7th grade was traumatizing. So I felt I needed the piano to express myself. So luckily we found somebody who was incredibly generous. Her name was Vera Sheen. She was willing to hear me and accepted me. And she knew I didn't have a piano and eventually found me a donor who loaned me a little upright that was about 4 feet tall, but had the most beautiful sound. Mahogany, shiny finish. It was the most beautiful thing. Just incredibly generous and loving and devoted. So I was very lucky to have landed in that situation.
Well, I'm from South Louisiana, which is a very interesting place in the United States. It's got its own culture and identity. It's very special in a lot of ways. But in my family, I was the first person to college. And so I grew up with a family who was used to working blue collar jobs. My dad was a welder in the oil industry and shipyards. My mom would work odd jobs, things like that. My dad played guitar and sang, so I always grew up around music. So we would play together quite a bit. I never had a keyboard or a piano. That's what I always wanted. And so I begged and begged and begged that we get a piano, that I could have piano lesson, but we had no money. I was literally in that situation where we ate what we caught for periods of my life, like, you know, so that was totally beyond our reality to pay for something like that. But since I was homeschooled, I started working very early, so I could work for my uncles who had businesses and things. So my first job, at age 12, I started working with my uncle who had a fence construction company. So I was putting up fences, and then I had enough money where I started like, okay, now I can probably get some piano lessons for this. But along the way, when I was 12 or 11, I think, someone needed a place to store one of those giant upright pianos. They said, we don't have anywhere to put this. And so my parents said, please put it in our place. So we got it. And inside the piano bench was a copy of John Thompson's Piano for Adults. And so I started teaching myself. So my first piano teacher was me. Open the book. There's a picture of the piano keyboard with the letter names. And so I would painstakingly figure out one letter at a time and started teaching myself the piano. When I had enough cash, I started paying for piano lessons. We found a teacher in the area, and that person for me, a very special person who I say saved my life, and it's very literal. Because I would not have survived the whole experience without her. And she set me on a path. For me, music represented a fantasy. It was a life that I had no experience with, because the life I knew from my parents and growing up was basically sustenance. You know, you're surviving. And your joy in life came for me through music, with singing and being with family. So it was a joyful existence in a way. But there was no path beyond that existence. And for me, when I became, you know, friends with other musicians in town and started seeing what their life could be, that was my portal into a wider world and a wider possibility of what the human existence could be.
I was probably in the third grade when I had made that decision, third or fourth grade, that I was going to be a piano teacher. You know what? I didn't know what that meant, to be a piano teacher or to be a professional musician. When I was in high school, of course, I won the award for the outstanding musician and all that kind of thing. And I decided to go to college as a musician. As a piano major, I had no idea what that meant. I didn't know that it meant, I didn't know what it meant. I thought it might mean that I would play for better churches, or, I was from rural Pennsylvania. I didn't know. And I played my first Beethoven. I didn't know there was like really classical music out there. I did some Liszt, I did some Beethoven, but I didn't know getting a music degree meant being a classical musician. That was a shock for me. I still like the idea of teaching other people music, however. So I doubled. I got a degree in piano performance and music education.
I will say it was really after I graduated um, with my first degree that I really felt that I really wanted to become a musician, and it was pretty much do or die. One of those things where you had, you know, one gets told, oh, you, you know, you're going to be poor as a musician, and I was like, well, I just have to do it, and I wasn't going to be part of that statistic.
I think I always knew I wanted to be a professional musician. I really did like playing concerts a lot. I really liked playing with orchestras. I really liked playing for singers. I liked playing chamber music. I liked all those different things. But I was pretty competitive. I was a pretty competitive person. And so I started entering competitions because I kind of got a kick out of them. I thought they were kind of fun, but they were also disheartening sometimes. When you lost, it really felt rotten. But I'd always had this kind of bee in my bonnet that I wanted to go to the Van Cliburn competition. So that was always kind of tucked away in the back of my mind. Oh, maybe I should go to the Cliburn competition. I had friends that had been there. And so that was sort of the big goal that I had, was to go do that competition. So I finally did it. And that was sort of a different kind of a turning point for me.
I was not supposed to be a music major. You know, I was the elder child of a family who had very, very little income. I'm supposed to go into a field where I was guaranteed a job with an incredible salary, and music was not in the picture. I loved it, and my teacher at that time, Ernesto Lajano, said, "You will regret it." You know, and I kept thinking, wow, I don't know, at 18, 17, whatever it was, I didn't know I loved it enough. But he convinced my uncle, who was my father figure, because I lost my father when I was very young, that you cannot put music on pause for 4 years, and then, or even 2 years, or even a year, and say, well, there's a mistake. Music cannot be put on pause. So it convinced my engineer uncle at that time. So I must have had enough commitment to at least be open to that idea. I went to work with Mr. Pressler at Indiana, and everybody thought it was a big, big mistake. How do you leave Juilliard to go to Indiana? But it was the way I knew in my heart and my soul that this was the man who was able to inspire me and to open up a world of that I didn't think I could do or wanted to do. So I was a late bloomer, definitely not, 12, and I knew what I was doing. I would say in my mid to late 20s, I was starting to practice regularly, daily.
When my peers told me, because I was asking that as a freshman, like, oh, what are you planning to do after this? They'd say, oh, I want to perform. And my response was, oh, so for weddings, for restaurants? No, concert pianist. I didn't know that was a job or something someone could do. I had never been to a solo piano recital before I was there. So it was a real eye-opener for me.
Everyone had a very different journey in their training as a professional musician. A few people talked about switching from school to school until they found the right teacher. Some people also spoke about the balance between working a job and pursuing a degree. It was clear that everyone spent their time in school discovering their own professional and personal identity, and that discovery was definitely a gradual process.
All right, so now some secret times. I was supposed to get married to my college boyfriend, and I ended up getting an assistantship to Bowling Green State University here in Ohio in piano performance. And I made the choice of not student teaching and not getting married. And I went on to school for my master's in piano performance. I actually didn't finish my master's and got a job at the University of Toledo. And I did get married when I was in Toledo. That marriage ended very sadly, and it's the best thing that ever happened to me. At the time, it was the most horrible, but then again, I was feeling tied down then even, and felt like there was more. And so after I was divorced, unfortunately, or fortunately, I moved on, I sold my house, I got rid of all my possessions, and went to doctoral school. Best decision I ever made. Best decision.
I really wanted to pursue more of a performance kind of focused education. So I had a sister who was working at the UN in Geneva, so I went and stayed with her. Ended up going to the conservatoire for a year, and really, started playing the piano again. And then from the conservatoire, I'd been introduced to Eastman School of Music, so I applied and, you know, amazingly got in, and that's how, I got my master's in performance, piano literature, and then went on to do my doctorate at UT. When I was at Eastman, the same thing. I was a TA, and then when I came to UT, I was a TA for Dr. Martha Hilly and also Amanda Vick Lethko.
It was a little bit of a comedy of errors. I had sort of won a bunch of competitions and made my debut with the Seattle Symphony and things like that. But I applied to the University of Washington and I did not get a music scholarship. And that really irked me no end. So I said, well, I'm not going to go to school there. So my dad was a Lutheran pastor. And so I said, well, I'm just going to go to Pacific Lutheran University. And I was really more of a voice major there. And so I spent all of my time singing. I was in this choir and we toured Europe and we did all these things. But I knew it wasn't really where I needed to be. So I just went there for a year. So I left. I just left and I didn't know what I was going to do. And I moved back to California where my parents had moved. And I went to a community college and then I got a job as an accompanist at the community college. I was easily bored. And so I got a job singing and dancing at an amusement park to earn money to go to Juilliard. So I've always been a little bit of a creative thinker. So that's what I did. I earned money to go to Juilliard by singing and dancing. And then I went to Juilliard for a year. And I also didn't like Juilliard, so I left Juilliard. And then I went to USC, University of Southern California, and studied with John Perry. And that was the first time I felt like I was in the right place. I had the right teacher in the right situation. And I felt like he was really making me play so much better than I'd ever played in my life. And that was fantastic. So I really liked doing that.
I had 4 years after high school graduation before I started my undergraduate degree. So I was also an older entering student. It just took me that long to get a lot of parts of my life together and make that work. So it was difficult to prepare that audition. Once I was in the school, it was also difficult, that transition to a new reality, and you're around a group of peers that are high performing students. I was that student who, had also that friend who could learn that late Beethoven sonata in 2 weeks. And here I was just trying to wade through the first couple of pages of, a Chopin mazurka or something. So very difficult. But the challenge, like most challenges, you learn a lot pushing through the process.
Most of the people I interviewed taught piano lessons very early on in life, and also talked about how bad they were at teaching at first. Many people spoke about the importance of teaching for their own personal financial support, while they also talked about loving their students, loving to connect with people, and loving the music as well.
I started teaching piano probably when I was 11. So again, there weren't very many musicians in my hometown. Well, there were a lot of musicians, but not very many pianists. And so when you needed lessons, I was the one that gave them. I was a horrible piano teacher, just horrible. I don't know why they dealt with me, except for I only charged probably a dime or a quarter, if they could pay. And eventually, I learned how to be a better piano teacher. All right, when I was at the University of Toledo, I was teaching 5 group classes a day, so right in a row, a lot of times, starting at 9, ending at 2 or 3. Then I was teaching night classes, community classes, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday evenings for another 3 hours each. So I was teaching a lot. I was very young. I was 21, I think, when I started the job. I mean, I would go into a room and sit down and somebody would say, I wonder who the teacher is. And I go, it's me. But I didn't have a clue to what I was doing. And as I progressed, and I was there for 10 years at the University of Toledo, I got better at what I did, and I streamlined what I did, and I learned how to teach at the University of Toledo. I was teaching these night classes, the communiversity classes, and I was very successful. And I had no idea why. I even quit them for a little while so I could do some other training. And they sort of faltered while I was gone, and then they boomed back up when I came back. And I'm like, why? I had no idea what I was doing. So then when I went on for my doctorate, I made my emphasis andragogy, which is teaching adults. And I found out why I was successful, and it was just lucky. It was just total luck. But it really gave me an interest. So in that time in Toledo, I learned how to hone my craft, and I learned what I was going to be interested in for the future.
Well, my very first teaching jobs, they were sort of like little kids. When I was still a student at UT, and also I was also being supervised by um, professors then. My first teaching job was actually as a professor when I got to the University of Louisiana at Lafayette. I would say that's where everything became sort of consolidated in terms of teaching, because before then I was doing a lot of performing and maybe teaching in that way.
And I actually was teaching when I was a kid. So my first teaching jobs, this is pretty funny, were teaching guitar. I'm really not a very good guitarist, but I was good enough to teach, some kids. And then my piano teacher gave me some piano students, but boy, I had no idea what I was doing with them. I would just try to give them the pieces that I'd played like the year before or something. And that was really not going to work out because, I was playing like Mendelssohn Concerto or something. And Annie was not ready for, anything even vaguely approaching that. By the time I graduated and I had, I'd been to Juilliard, I'd been to USC, and I'd been to Peabody, and I'd had one semester class of pedagogy. I took a job working actually for Keith Snell's mom, who wanted somebody to come and do some teaching in her studio. And I learned so much from her because she knew all about how to teach beginners. And so she would say, give this kid this book, give this kid this piece. And I saw her teaching all of this sort of intermediate repertoire, which I just didn't know. I mean, I just had never seen any of it.
Well, I started teaching as a teenager to some of our neighborhood's kids, and I have to apologize to them. I was the worst. I didn't know what I was doing. But I think they've forgiven me. They've come to my concerts in Edmonton and haven't been scarred. They still love music. Not until I was in Indiana, one of my last years there, I became my teacher's assistant. So I remember working with some of the undergraduates, because I was a master's student at the time, going through the repertoire. I didn't really take any pedagogy classes. My focus was really just on playing the piano and practicing and preparing for competitions and concerts. So my first position that was offered to me was actually at the University of Colorado in Boulder. I remember the first student that I had, that was my own student, the first lesson lasted 4 hours. I had no idea what I was doing. I just talked and talked and talked. Poor girl. She also survived. She's doing very well. But that's how it all started.
I started teaching piano actually a couple of years before going to college, like a lot of people do, So my teacher sort of helped foster me into that teaching world. So I started giving lessons at the local music store there, which was, it was an incredible experience because I was coming from working in the mechanic shop. Also had some other odd jobs that were just sort of nightmarish journeys through each day. So I had some preparation that way with teaching as well. I'd had a few students as an undergrad every year of my degree. More and more teaching became the primary source of my income and got to focus more and more on what I wanted to do. And so, as I walked into graduate school, it was more of that assistantship plus some private teaching. But I always had a large studio for a student. I don't think there was a time where I had fewer than 20 students after undergraduate. And I think that's typical for a lot of music majors. But again, especially if you're going to focus on expertise in teaching as your field, and you're going to get a doctorate in something like a concentration of pedagogy, you need that teacher experience, that practicum experience. So it was something I did out of necessity. I probably would have done less of it, but it became a huge advantage that I taught all the way through school. I did have an adjunct teaching position. I was in Oklahoma. I taught for a year at Oklahoma City University. They needed some help in teaching their group piano classes. I was teaching quite a bit. I said, whatever classes you need me to cover, I'm happy to do it. So on Tuesday, Thursday, I would teach 8 sections of class piano and then a section of pedagogy in the evening. I'm not sure I've ever seen anyone with that type of teaching schedule, like with that much class piano. But I'll tell you that you get really good at teaching class piano when you do it that much.
In these interviews, each person shared with me some difficulties they faced in the form of discrimination. I think it's important to bring those issues to light, not only so that we can understand we are not alone in facing these difficulties, but also so that we can make an effort to stop unjust discriminatory behaviors and beliefs.
Being a woman is wonderful and horrible all at the same time. It traces back to childhood, actually, when sometimes I could get away with things by just being a girl, and sometimes I was overlooked for things because I was a girl. I never thought being a woman was a detriment until I got farther along in my career. When I got my first job in Toledo, I was in the trenches. I learned a lot. I taught a lot. I learned everything. That's why I call it in the trenches, because I was deeply, deeply involved with my job and how to teach and what should be taught. But at one point, there was a tenure track position that I was promised at that school. And that fall, it went to somebody else. I was promised. And I deeply resented that. My career was put on hold at that point. And after that, of course, I went on for my doctorate, which had absolutely none of that characteristic. Then I came to the University of Cincinnati. And I would say that the university itself has not been a problem as much as there are times, both on committee work, mostly on committee work, where women, including myself, have been overlooked. I will say something that's totally ignored or said, no, 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 no. A man says it 3 minutes later, and suddenly it's wonderful. That just, it just bites in. I'm fortunate to have a wonderful dean who would never, ever do that. And he listens to everything I have to say. But it doesn't happen all the time.
It's not easy being a woman. It really isn't. It's not easy, period. Whether it's, I don't know. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard for a woman. It's hard. Especially if you're trying to combine family life. And yeah, there's discrimination. There's discrimination on, this is not music that comes from my heritage. Earlier, before now we have so many Asian pianists. How can you understand this music? I remember someone asking me that when I was in South Africa. This is not your music. Why don't you play just your music? And I just remember telling him, I think this is music for everyone. It's universal. I understand it. or I think I understand it. It speaks to me, it touches me. So, but I was shocked that somebody would ask me how I would find connection to this. Yeah, I remember playing with a very well established European German conductor, and I was playing Brahms concerto, and he says, "This is not meant for a woman, and not meant for a non-German person." And so, I mean, those kinds of things, you just kind of smile um, and do the best you can. And turns out I was reinvited to the orchestra many, many times after that. I think he was too, just not together anymore. We got through, and he wrote me a very sweet note afterwards, saying, how much he enjoyed it. And you just live and learn, because the music's worth it.
So, any challenges that I faced? Well, I faced quite a few. Coming from Ghana, West Africa, um, in spite of everything, as I said, the great education I had, I got to England and I experienced my first real opera there. You know, went to these concerts and that most people there or in Europe or had been going as part of their life. So I had a lot to catch up on. The other challenge this was pretty much about finances, getting through my degrees in at Eastman and even Austin, and I just had such amazing help and also anonymous help, which is just insane, and and also just because I was on a Ghana visa, I wasn't afforded the opportunity to travel for competitions or anything like that abroad. Trying to travel was just really a nightmare if you're on a non-American passport. There are times that I felt, maybe, trying to open a studio was also a little challenging for a while because I felt maybe I started thinking it was also, because of my race, was kind of, yeah, a little bit of that. Um, and just some of the questions I would get, are you a jazz player? Are you a basketball player? Things like that, and people sort of being surprised I could play a Chopin sonata. I don't know, little things like that, just kind of now and again just seep through, or or being on a tour with my dual piano partner Susie Garcia and probably not being served in a restaurant. Interesting things, but I've made it through.
Early career decisions can often be difficult to make, and every person I spoke to definitely admitted to some mistakes. They had decisions that they regretted, but they also had decisions that they could look back on and feel glad about how things had turned out. However, when asked to offer advice about how to make your own decisions or how to start a career, everyone said the same thing: follow your passion and everything will be okay.
Yeah, the decisions are always hard, but you know which one you have to make. You just have to make it. I think it's passion and knowing what you're passionate about or finding your passion. Sometimes it's not what you think it's going to be. My passion at first, when I first came into the field, was playing the piano and making music. And it's still a passion of mine. I still love it. Matter of fact, I just played a concerto in December the MacDowell Piano Concerto Number 2. So music itself has always been a passion, but teaching has also been a passion, and I've loved teaching. So I've honed my skills as a teacher. But then all of a sudden I started reading about microaggression, and then it became my passion. And so I've been researching that, and now I'm doing workshops on microaggression. And then sure enough, I found my niece has 5 children. They're all different ages, and I could just see Piaget in them. And now all of a sudden I'm researching Piaget again. Passion is what you leave yourself open to, and it should really never stop. If it does, it's sad. Find it somewhere else. Find it. It's there.
I think when I was in Louisiana, I was experiencing probably a little bit of burnout, and I came to the Pacific Northwest. I made a list of what liked in a place. You know, a great place, not too hot, not too cold, in terms of uh, progressive society. Um, with lots of musical opportunities, and so I just sort of came here and set my roots, and I actually had I just really fell in love with this area, and it just felt like a place where my heart really felt good, and so just kind of decided that I went back and resigned my tenured position. I know it was absolutely crazy, but I just thought I needed to do something radical like that. And I also knew that, I had a good education and good experience, that I would not fail, really.
So when I think about how to make decisions, teaching decisions or career decisions, I think one thing that helps me a lot now, and that I wish I'd understood a little bit better, is nobody can do everything. And by that, I mean, like, for instance, I hate playing List. Okay, I hate it. Now, there are plenty of people in the world that like to play List. And every time the American List Society, meets and they put up their pictures on Facebook, I always write these funny things to all my very good friends that are in this organization. And I say, I'm so glad you're all there. Have fun. It's a great time. Okay, so what I'm talking about is the idea that without becoming, a Rameau specialist or someone who only plays the music of Prokofiev, you can still find out what you love to do and what you're really good at. And this really applies to teaching, because I think many people find what they really like to do. I love teaching intermediate students, or I love teaching beginners, but then I really don't love it that much after they're 10 years old. Or I love teaching teenage girls. Why anyone would want to do that, I don't know. They're hard to teach, but maybe that's your thing. Or I love teaching college kids. Or I now teach all these really amazing avocational adults. Like not to be super braggy, but I'll be a little braggy. One of my adult students just won the Chopin amateur competition in Warsaw, which is kind of a big deal. And I love teaching those people. I think the idea that you're supposed to do everything, that you're supposed to love doing everything, that you're not supposed to have opinions and, want to do a certain kind of thing is really so detrimental. You can find all the things that you love and just keep doing more and more of them, but you kind of have to come out and say, this is what I really love. And not be embarrassed about it, because I grew up thinking I was supposed to, love everything. I was supposed to be good at everything, and it really makes you kind of not think about what you really want to do because you're so busy trying to pretend that you like to do everything. And of course you don't. Nobody does. And everybody has preferences. So anyway, that would be my biggest thing, would be really be honest with yourself about what you love to do and then try to do more of that. And then along the way, experiment. But there's so many ways to do things. And I think if you go into it feeling like I want to find out what I like to do and I'm going to try and keep doing more of that, the world becomes a much easier place. I think it's helpful sometimes just to hear the stupid things that people do because I really was always trying to do the right thing and I just made some really dumb mistakes, and everybody does.
So, early career decisions that I've made that are good and bad. Probably when we're talking early career, I'm going to talk about my time at the University of Toledo, because that's when my career really started. I was an adjunct professor. My decision to stay there and trust that I would advance in that position was totally naive. I didn't understand about academia and how you can go up the ranks in academia, which isn't easy. I didn't understand that people will make promises and not follow through, and they don't have to follow through because there's nothing in writing. So I think I stayed there too long. I don't regret the time, the 10 years, because I did learn a lot and it prepared me for my future, but I stayed there too long. So that was probably a decision that I wish I had not made. In my early career, the decision that I did make finally to leave and go on for my doctorate was a really good decision. But this is what's going to sound very odd. I'm glad I didn't do it right after my master's. I'm glad I had 10 years in Toledo. I wish I would have had 5 years or 7 years, because that background helped me with my doctoral studies and helped me figure out what my passion is before I went on for my doctorate. I did not go on to my doctorate aimlessly. I had a purpose. So I'd say that was my best decision. It was definitely my best decision.
Um, I would say, in general, I've been very happy with the decisions I've made. Um, I have ultimately followed my passion, you know, and which is really important. I mean, there's no point in being miserable. There's just absolutely no point in being miserable where one is. And sometimes um, life may throw you a curve that may force you out, you know, to places. That's happened to some colleagues of mine, but ultimately, there's always a better door that opens up, and I just really, think all my decisions were a little scary, but I just knew that I wasn't going to die, you know, and with a good education and being a little resourceful, you know, it all works out, you know. I really believe that.
There are a few things I I realized I would not do the same way. But I regret some of those decisions and people that I've hurt during that time. But I also am not a person to dwell on the past. I think I really believe in life that things work out for the way they're supposed to be working out. And that sometimes things happen and you don't really deserve these kinds of things to happen. Where sometimes you really deserve something and it doesn't happen. So there's a way of balancing things.
Honestly, I'm not sure I would do anything differently. I don't have any regrets with the directions I took. Uh, Perhaps that's the optimist in me, because I look back at every single, well, that's exaggerating. I can't remember every single moment, but those sort of pivotal moments, those pivotal decisions, those big moves. And I think every one of them led me to where I am, and I'm really happy with where I am. The thing I might regret, and I'm even hesitant to say this, but the thing I regret is not enjoying the ride just a little bit more. But I wish I could have known that it would all work out okay. Like, if you can go back and just say, it's all going to be okay. And that's for the most part true. I mean, for the most part, we don't experience those major traumas, which there's no return from. It's probably going to be okay. And so I wish I could have let go and enjoyed some of those moments, even enjoyed the trials and tribulation a little bit more. We lead our lives to the next goal. If we are high performing and driven creatures who are curious and want to succeed and are passionate, we set milestones for ourselves. So for me, it was, okay, get to college. I get to college, undergraduate degree, great. Master's degree, great. And within that, you've got all the others: senior recital, master's recital, all of these other things. First conference presentation. Every one of these is so monumental at that moment and incredibly stressful. And they seem like the next milestone, and you must reach it. But there's nothing on the other side. And the goals are fantastic. Placing first at that competition pushes you to a level of excellence that makes you a better person. The growth is huge. Writing that book or getting that promotion, it's all meaningful. It's not that it's not worth the hard work, but the stress of this means everything to your life is absolutely false. And so I think that's one of those things I would look back and think, wow, if my perspective had been different, I could have experienced a bit more joy through the process. I hate to tear it away though, Brianna, because maybe I wouldn't have tried as hard, but I would like to think that I would have worked without sheer terror as my motivation, and that there's some balance in between there.
I have lots of advice to young professionals, but they're already doing it, so much of it. One thing right off the top is school is more. If you're talking about going to school, it's more than just going to school. You're forming the foundation of your future. When you're in school, you should be getting your network together. You should be talking to people, getting ideas from people, going to conferences, doing everything you can to develop who you are, because you don't know who you are. It makes me sad when people go to school and figure out that or think that all they have to do is this one thing and graduate. The whole idea of graduation is not to graduate. That means that you've reached some sort of mental and emotional maturity that you didn't have before school.
Follow one's passion and trust, and just trust. Honestly, it ultimately boils down to that.
Yeah.
And I'm happy I'm even talking about it and reminding myself.
I think learning to say yes and just to follow your instincts, to follow what things feel like to you. Taking a student just because there's something about them that interests you, or not taking a student because you've got a funny little vibe about that's not going to be the right thing for you. Well, when I think about the things that I wish people had told me when I was in school, one of the most important ones for me, and that I wish I'd understood more, I sort of got it, but not really, is that the people you're in school with will be your friends and especially your colleagues forever. And they are not your enemies. They are not people with whom you should have anything but the warmest relationships. I was, like I said, I was a pretty competitive person, but I also went to competitive schools to some extent. And I didn't really understand this concept of that we were together in these schools for this short period of time, and then we would go all over the world. And in that process of dispersing and going out in all these places, we would have colleagues all over the world. And those people, especially the best ones that we liked the best, might be the best colleagues that we would have forever.
Be the best wherever you are. And your happiness and the best work that you do will be radiating from you. And from that, maybe somebody that you weren't trying to impress will notice it and will bring you to the next level. But don't think, if I don't get there, I failed. Being the best where you are and being happy, it's the best. It's really the only way to live, I think. We, as teachers, we are role models for our students, you know. Definitely my teachers were my role models. You know, they just incredible people, incredibly busy people, yet they were so incredibly generous to all of their students. And I feel that I want to be like that for them. I'm not perfect. I mean, I'm not far from it, but I try each day, to try to give 100% to them, to myself, to the music.
But when we think about like where we work and why we want to work there should be the opportunity to consider a bit more. And I think if we're really self-reflective and maybe even a little bit critical in a positive sense, look at our skill set critically and think, what am I good at? What do I have to offer? Rather than, let me just convince them I'm the right fit for this. And, you know, I know you have experience in applying for jobs, and really it does turn into a lot of these position searches. It really is just looking for the best fit rather than the shiniest and most amazing CV with the biggest line items on that person's activities. 8 hours in a practice room, even if your course, if you're on track to say win Tchaikovsky and Clyburn and you're going on a concert touring sort of approach in your life, even the 8 hours in the practice room is not going to get you there either anymore. So it's not the solution to a performing career. That reality is not how the world works anymore, for the most part. It works for a handful of people, literally a handful of people, maybe 2 handfuls, and that's it. The rest of the folks who are doing it are entrepreneurs with a variety of skill set, and I'm sure you know them as well as I do. Incredible musicians who are putting together really interesting career portfolios that are not just their next Carnegie Hall gig.
More than anything else, authenticity and passion were the central themes for every conversation I had with these inspiring people. They all said to be true to who you are and do some exploring to find out what you truly love to do, and then go do that thing and give it everything you've got. If you do that, the path down the long and winding road will become clear. Thank you so much to each individual who shared their time and thoughts with us for this session today. And thank you so much for viewing this session. I hope it was helpful, and I wish you all the best in your own musical journey.